Here are the first results of Vladimir Putin's visit to Beijing for the summit with Xi Jinping. Chinese military secretly trained Russian soldiers on their territory, after which these soldiers returned to participate in combat operations in Ukraine. This is already direct involvement of China in the war against Ukraine. And everything indicates that Beijing is ready to continue helping Putin in the war as long as he keeps sending his unwashed Ivan soldiers to fight, so that the West is occupied with Russia and not China. At the same time, Putin is doing everything he can to show Xi Jinping that he is not a washed-up leader yet. And now Russia and Belarus have announced a large-scale synchronized nuclear exercise. So let's discuss all of this together in this episode. My name is Alexei Peci. Let's discuss this topic together, but first I ask you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, give it a like, and write any comment you want. And before we begin, just a second of your time, because this episode is brought to you with the support of the Preply platform. This is a Ukrainian platform for online foreign language tutors. There are about 100,000 teachers and 90 languages there. It's perfect for those of you who, for example, have emigrated. You can learn German, English, Polish, really any language. And what's very important for you is that right now they have a 50% discount on the first lesson. That's why in the description of this video there's a link, and by following it you'll immediately get a 50% discount from the YouTube channel Alexei Peci. Well, let's move on to the episode. So, Reuters reports that the Chinese military secretly trained about 200 Russian soldiers on their territory. After that, many of them returned to take part in the fighting in Ukraine. This is according to 3 European intelligence agencies and documents in Reuters' possession. According to intelligence data, the training of Russian savage occupiers was carried out at facilities in Beijing and Nanjing at the end of last year. The training sessions were primarily focused on the use of drones, as well as electronic warfare, army aviation, and armored units. One of the intelligence officers stated that by training Russian military personnel, China turned out to be much more actively involved in the war than previously thought. It is reported that the training of Russian personnel in China is a new phenomenon. The training was conducted under a bilateral agreement signed on July 2, 2025 in Beijing by high-ranking military representatives of Russia and China, which provides for mutual training of Russian and Chinese personnel. Chinese military personnel are present on the territory of both countries. Intelligence has confirmed the identities of several Russian military personnel who received training in China and then participated in combat operations in occupied Crimea and the occupied Zaporizhzhia region. Their ranks range from junior sergeant to lieutenant colonel. Internal Russian reports reviewed by Reuters describe 4 training sessions. One of them, dated December 2025, mentions a course for 50 Russian occupiers at the Academy of Ground Forces of the Chinese People's Liberation Army in Shijiazhuang, where soldiers were taught to fire 82mm mortars using drones to identify targets. Another report describes air defense training, including the use of electronic warfare equipment and nets at a facility in Zhengzhou. A third report, also from December, describes drone flight training using flight simulators at a training center in Yibin. The fourth is a course in November 2025 at the PLA Infantry's Nanjing Military Engineering University, focused on working with explosives, mine clearance, and neutralizing unexploded ordnance. In a statement to Reuters, the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as always, simply rejects and denies all information, and they say the following, quote, "Regarding the Ukrainian crisis, China consistently maintains an objective and impartial position and works to promote peaceful negotiations. This is a consistent and clear line that has been witnessed by the international community. The relevant parties should not deliberately fuel confrontation or shift blame." However, European powers are still watching with caution the increasingly close relationship between Beijing and Moscow. This week, Vladimir Putin is on a state visit to China. This is his 25th visit. The two countries call their relationship an all-weather partnership, despite Western calls for Beijing to put pressure on Moscow to end the war. And today, Vladimir Putin made a demonstrative statement, quote, The close Russian-Chinese strategic partnership plays an important stabilizing role on the world stage. At the same time, our friendship is not directed against anyone, but are working for the cause of peace and universal prosperity. At the same time, right on the eve of his visit to Beijing, the balding Russian dictator Vladimir Putin decided to show his master Xi Jinping that he still has some strength left. Well, the little dog ran up to its master, wagging its tail by his leg and saying, "Listen, I'm still young and good, don't throw me away yet." What am I talking about? The Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation announced that from May 19 to 21, the Russian armed forces are conducting exercises to prepare for the use of nuclear forces under threat of aggression. The main objectives of the maneuvers will be to practice actions to deter the enemy and to check the level of training of the personnel. In addition, during the exercises, launches of ballistic and cruise missiles at test ranges on Russian territory are planned. This will be happening at the same time when Putin is having tea with Xi Jinping. It is reported that the strategic missile forces are involved in the exercises. The Pacific Fleet of the Russian Federation, the Northern Fleet, the Long Range Aviation Command, and some forces from the Leningrad and Central Military Districts. In total, more than 64,000 military personnel and over 7,800 pieces of equipment will take part in the maneuvers. This includes more than 200 missile launchers, over 140 aircraft, 73 surface ships, and 13 submarines, 8 of which are strategic missile submarines. And I should note that the day before, the Ministry of Defense of Belarus, well, in fact, it's basically the same as the Ministry of Defense of Russia, just called differently, announced the start of joint exercises with Russia on the delivery of nuclear warheads and preparation for their use. As the objectives of the maneuvers, the Belarusian Defense Ministry listed improving the training level of personnel, checking the readiness of weapons, military and special equipment for task execution, as well as organizing combat deployment from non-designated areas. And a week before that, let me remind you, Vladimir Putin announced the successful launch of the Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile, which is supposed to replace the Voyevoda, the oldest nuclear missile currently in service. In the end, all this showmanship came down to convincing China that Putin is still in control for now. I'll leave it at that for now. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to give a like. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so by donating through the links and details in the description of this video. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.